Hey, we're live. Hey, everybody. Is there everybody, technically? Because I think it's just you and me, Alex. We've got the show, and there's nobody in our chat room. So if we talk really quietly, I don't think
The
anybody will
whole,
know we're here.
the whole internet won't be able to hear us. Shh.
It must be the time change because we normally have millions of people.
Yeah, I guess millions and millions of Californians have forgotten to change their watches, their clocks today.
No, that's right.
Actually, that screwed me up too because there I was like 1 hour ago sitting. Come on, Kyle, cutting a little fine here. It's like 1 or 2 minutes until we broadcast, and I haven't got the call yet. And then I message you and realize, oh yeah, hold on, there's that little something annoying something called daylight saving time.
When do we? Anyway, hey, it's our weekly podcast where we discuss all things game audio. Can you do the next line, Alex?
Um,
From creative
Industry,
ideas.
industry, industry tips for. No, I can't. You have to do it.
From creative ideas to the latest techniques, project experiences to audio secrets, here's where you'll find your in-depth coverage and opinions that only belong to Alex and Kyle that are related to game audio.
Well,
There we go.
what other opinions are there? Now, I have two things to announce. Firstly, I'm going to need to probably jump out of my chair for a moment during today's broadcast because there's likely to be a delivery coming to my door, so I'll just pre-warn you there. And secondly, there is indeed, for those viewers who can't see it, a line of mandarins going right into my neck. You can just see it right here.
You
And these
could.
are, look at
You
that,
could
looks like I'm holding this.
oh, sorry. I keep interrupting you.
Yeah. Anyway,
Alex, for those who can't see, is now eating the mandarins as if he's like Max Headroom and something's entering from the side of his mouth.
yeah, it's a wonderful thing about Japan, actually. This is completely unrelated to game audio, but I'll say it anyway, that Japan is extremely good for seasonal fruit. And right now we're coming into winter, which means it's mandarin time.
Oh, that's right before the winter, huh?
Yeah, so we have, this is the best time. We have apples and mandarins and persimmons, and yeah, it's all good stuff. So how are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I'm tired. There's 3 projects I'm working on, and they're all super fun. But it's been like 3 months of not having a weekend, and I think it's finally catching up to me. One of the projects ends this weekend, which I'm really excited about, but kind of sad because it's been a really awesome project of doing just guitar. I mean, they're like, "Hey, will you play guitar on a bunch of stuff?" I'm like, "Really? That's it? I don't have to compose anything or think about stuff?" And they're like, "No, here's music," and they hand me cues, and I play guitar, and somebody else engineers. I'm like, "This is a dream come true." And of course, that one's ending,
Right.
so that's made me a little tired. But I'll be happy to get my weekends back. And
Yeah,
then
this thing about this is a bit unrelated to our topic for today, but this thing about working from home, you got to really be careful with it, don't you? Because as you can see, I do that too, and um, you really need to, it's easy to sort of think when you're enjoying your work and you're having fun, and I mean, our work is fun. We just play games and write music. I mean, and make crazy sound effects. You can't argue with that. But
yeah,
it's so easy to forget the importance of just taking a break every now and then and just doing something completely unrelated to games or sound or music or anything computer related even. It's so like yeah, it's just so easy to forget, and you get into this unfortunate pattern where when you're not working, you feel just kind of bored, and it's like, well, I'd rather actually be just writing some music or playing some games or producing some sound. I'd rather not be relaxing.
yeah,
But then if it goes on too long like that, you sort of find yourself you feel yourself going a little bit crazy, and it's also not good from an artistic point of view as well. It's not good to be stuck thinking about music and sound all the time,
hmm
and approaching music and sound from only a music and sound starting point when you're trying to put things together. It's helpful to have other other emotions and other thoughts to try and bounce off the artistry as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah, I absolutely. It's good to like I'm trying to think. Let me collect my thoughts. I'm going to mumble now. Okay,
Okay.
no, I'm not going to mumble off. I okay, I lied. Mumble's still on. But I spoke at a college last Friday. I'm trying to figure out how to succinctly say everything that happened. And I was talking to some kids about game audio, and I tried to impart to them how important it is to be good to work with, right? And this seems like kind of a weird connection. And how even if your skill set is kind of lower, if you're really fun to work with, you get called back. And to do that, I tried to impart to them the importance of not doing games, to do all kinds of different projects. Because if you just focus on just doing games all the time, you kind of get embroiled in the politic of making games.
Absolutely.
And then your two things go wrong is that you don't have a skill set outside of doing audio for games, and there's so many important ways. Go play in a band and bring some of that into your composition, or go play in the local orchestra. And even though you're like the 500th chair, which is where I would qualify, you're still getting this experience that you can bring into games. And you didn't spend your time playing games, so you were out with people, you were socializing, you were in these different musical kind of arrangements and stuff like that. And so I tried to tell them, go do non-game stuff. I'm talking to a class of game guys about somehow finding the time not to do game stuff. I only got to touch on it for a second and everything I had to say. In an hour, I tried to impart onto them everything there is to know about game audio. Just not enough time.
I agree entirely. It's so important to diversify your experience, really, isn't it? I mean, I came into game audio from a background of industrial design and graphic design and web design, and before that, I was in human resources as well. So, I find that when I'm working on game audio, the most useful thoughts that pop into my head are usually things that aren't related to games or music or audio. Mm-hmm. But actually related to other things, like, for example, the way that you would approach designing a product in industrial design, or the way that you would approach negotiating with, a contractee if you're in human resources or whatever. Those kinds of sort of non-musical thoughts tend to be what's most useful. And I think one problem that you see with, I wouldn't call it a problem, I would just say one tendency that you see with game developers, game audio people who are so full on into games and so steeped in that whole culture is that I wouldn't call it being blinkered, but I would call it just having maybe a limited perspective of what's possible artistically, because you've only seen games. You only know games. Or what about the beauty of fine literature? Or what about the experience of walking into refined architecture? What about that feeling of being moved at watching really high quality stage play or stage theater? I think all of those kinds of experiences are so useful for something like writing a piece of music, or playing a game and then thinking about what kind of sound would be suitable for this event. It's a shame to have only just games to draw reference from.
Yeah, I was in this class when I was talking. I kept making reference to a show called Constantine that just came out. I don't know if you've seen it yet. I saw it on Hulu, so if you're a Hulu membership, I'm not even going to ask that stupid question. So, moving on, I'm in a class.
No, Japan doesn't have Hulu.
I'm not saying anything. I didn't ask that question. You asked that question. I don't know who has what.
Please continue.
The internet just makes me feel like everybody's next door to me. So if I say, hey, I'm on Hulu and I celebrate Halloween, I expect that you are on Hulu and you celebrate Halloween. I don't know if you do.
Keep going.
Making fun of me.
So Constantine, focus, Carl, focus.
Constantine. Let's talk about Robert Fripp. So Constantine, I go to this class about game audio, and the first thing I talk to them about is the sound design on a television show. But I couldn't explain to them enough on how similar those things are and how you bring the essence of one into the other. So it's good for you to. They have this great scene in Constantine, if you haven't seen it, where this girl's being hunted by a demon.
Right.
And what was amazing to me about that scene was that, first of all, it was handled in a movie way, if I'm doing air quotes. They had this kind of like movie sensibility to the way they did the suspense, rather than a TV show that's all boom, boom, boom. You got a half hour to an hour to 45 minutes because of commercials to hurry up and get to something. So oftentimes TV doesn't really get to really sustain that suspense for very long because they're in a hurry, and this one did that, and it was really brilliant how they did it. She got in a car. I won't explain the whole thing because the details would kill you, but she was getting in her car at night underneath a street light. Of course, all kinds of things happened, but the coolest thing that happened is she tried to back up, and she had one of those cameras on her car that warns you if something's behind you, and even though nothing was there,
Mm.
They would show the camera, nothing was there. Her car would give her the warning that she was backing into something, and the bad guy's there. He's just invisible.
Right.
And so she tried to do that a couple of times, and their use of mundane sounds just made them scary. It was like just the beeping of the warning just seemed frightening because you knew something was there, because so this is a case where the visuals actually informed the audio rather than typically the audio will inform the visuals. Like you watch a
Right.
TV show or a scary movie with no sound on, and my daughter does this all the time when she gets scared. She says, "Turn it down." She doesn't say turn it off, and
Ah.
so we turn it down so she can get through something that makes her uncomfortable. But the this scene was doing the opposite. It wasn't that frightening to look at, but because you knew what was going to happen, it made the mundane sounds even more frightening.
Mm.
So I was telling these guys about that and how that's very important to use those kind of tricks in games.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
my old boss is one of the two guys who runs that class,
Mm.
and it was just really neat to be called up by him to come talk about audio. It was really really nice of them both. Good guys. So if they're
I'm
listening.
I'm just going to launch off into a highly pretentious, abstract, artistic discussion now. So you have been duly warned.
I've got a scotch. Go for it.
Okay. Um, one. This is going to get pretty arty-farty. So are you ready?
You've warned me enough. I want to hear it now.
Okay. Now this is going to come around to game audio at the end. So just hang with me.
Okay.
You will have seen Japanese manga art before.
Never.
Japanese anime art, so anime art and manga art from that sort of that Japanese typical comic book style. You know what I'm talking about?
I do. I'm teasing.
Yeah. Now the reason that that art looks the way that it does is simply because this is coming back to game audio, so bear with me. It's simply because the artists who do it have extremely insular, introverted lifestyles, so they only see what their peers in the industry are doing. Literally, they don't watch TV very much. They don't get out very much. I'm making broad social generalizations here to emphasize the point. But the average manga artist in Japan has a very very unhealthy lifestyle where all they take in is other manga art so they can see what the other guys are doing, basically. So all that they put out is highly sort of reverse influenced by itself.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, if you see that this peer of yours in the manga art circles is drawing that way, you may start to think, you slightly sort of influence the way that you draw, so it's like their style, but a little bit different with your take on it. They see what you're doing, and then they change slightly, and it all develops in a very introverted way. It only bounces off itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so reflecting that onto game audio, you often see that tendency where people who only play games, that they're not interested in anything else except for playing games. Basically, games as an art form in itself becomes only influenced by itself.
Yeah.
And the result of that, like manga art, is you get this extremely highly saturated, exaggerated sort of version of the game art form.
Absolutely.
For example, I'll be a simple example, like the first-person shooter. If you've never played a first-person shooter before, you're likely to be pretty confused by all of these, like the sniper scope, or I don't know. Actually, I don't play first-person shooters, so I can't really pull out any of the fancy terms that the people use. But even something simple like strafing, a long time ago, a first-person shooter, maybe like Castle Wolfenstein or something, they thought the strafing would be useful to do. So they put it in there, and now all of them have to have this strafing. And then I'm sure there's a whole, if you're making a first-person shooter, I'm sure there's a whole science behind how to make a strafe feel really good.
Yeah.
And they're all sort of bouncing off each other. But then when you think about it, nothing new has happened here in the world of first-person shooters. It's just sort of reflecting off itself. And you can say the same about a lot of the different genres, the sort of typical quintessential game genres. And so that's why it's extremely important that people have the chance to just diversify their experience, expand the horizons, and just like these manga artists, if some of them went to, for example, if they had the opportunity to go to a European fine art museum and
Mm-hmm.
stand in front of incredible Renaissance oil paintings, I'm sure that would sort of just blow their horizon out sideways, and they'd realize, wow, I don't need to be drawing like my peers. I can be doing something a little bit different. I can try and, or even a different experience entirely. Like I said, like architecture or sculpture, or any of the wonderful things that humans do when they sit down to do art. So yeah, that's my huge arty-farty, abstract, pretentious rant. That
it's absolutely right.
It's really useful to be able to broaden your horizon. So when you're making your first-person shooter, you're not just thinking about how can we tweak this strafe mode so that it feels just perfect, but you're more thinking about how can we expand this whole idea of the first-person shooter to bring in different and new experiences.
You are preaching to the choir, as my dad always said. That's what kills me about indie games is, and I won't go off on a rant here, but it's like you've been handed the keys to the car. Do an awesome job of driving. The future of video games could be in your hands, Mr. Indie Game Designer.
I think what you mean to say is if you've got the keys to the car, don't just drive to the shopping mall.
Yeah, maybe that's a better way to put it. Don't go to the mall and hang out with your friend. No, it's just that I guess it's a bad analogy, but or metaphor, but it's just that the future of video games, in my opinion. Hold on, let me get my soapbox. I gotta go in the garage. Is in the hands of the indies. Hopefully the big companies are trying to find a way to make fantastic games and treat everybody well and do all that stuff. And for the most part, I think that very large video game companies will always be needed. But as far as the creative side of video game play, the big companies are locked into continuing to create their Call of Duties, and I don't shame them for that. Lots of people buy that game. And this might contradict what I've said earlier, but I guess as I think about it more, my knee-jerk reaction is big game companies bad, small game companies good. But the truth is, one feeds off the other, and we can't have Call of Duties being created by a bunch of indie guys in their small companies, indie guys and gals, excuse me. And so take the opportunities, what I'm trying to say, as indie guys, to do something completely unique. And what I see them mostly doing is kind of hearkening back. A plethora of games are just being modern adaptations of an old Mario game or an old Zelda game, And there's so much more that can be done, so much more. And as a burgeoning game designer, I mean, aren't we all? That's what's great about being in the game industry is we all have game design sensibilities. And my dog won't shut up. And my phone won't start buzzing. Stop buzzing, so ignore those things.
My doorbell's going to ring in a minute, so don't worry.
Oh my God, this has just been I don't know if you guys can hear it on your end, but I've had this endless deaf Dalmatian barking next to my window, and
It's not bad. It's all right. I can hear it only just a tiny bit.
I'm trying to tell him to be quiet, but he can't hear me. He's deaf. He's 16 and deaf and just grumpy.
Write it on a card. Shut up. Like write it on his food or something. Spell it out in his food. Anyway.
I'll hang it around his neck so when he's licking himself he can see it. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make is reach out. Stop doing the easy thing. My sister once said, if it's hard to do, it must be the right thing to do. And I live with that all the time. And just go beyond, which is what you're saying, And when I sit down and I do a design doc for a game, sure, there are tropes that you lean on, If you want to do a game where cars are fighting with each other, it makes sense to have one car be an old stovepipe kind of car with a top hat and a scissor glove that comes out and punches the car next to it. Yeah, of course that's in there, but it doesn't have to be just cars that are, meeting this timed standard of what people have done over time. And no, reach beyond that. Think of something different. So there's part of me that thinks that the indie community is going to grow to that, but first we have to slough off all of this old skin. We have to train ourselves to do these very inventive and creative games by going through our reiterations of our Marios and our reiterations of our Zeldas, and those are the things that we love. And once we figure out that we can build those, we've built it, we've got it under our belt, and now we can go do these crazy things. Perhaps maybe those things pay the bills too, so that you can go do the crazy thing. I really don't know, but I just saw it indicate there were just too many derivatives of something that already existed, and I wanted to see something really new. The one thing I saw new is the last thing I'll say. And this is dangerous, is like when you take art too far, and I know this isn't necessarily our subject, but hell, we've only been doing this for 20 minutes, so we got 40 minutes of our subject. But when you take art too far, that's a dangerous thing too. I don't know if I ever told you, my parents ran an art gallery. So I grew up in this art gallery of all this art all over the place.
Mm.
And I had the crap job of polishing all the brass. That is a horrible job. I feel sorry for anybody who has to polish brass. They give you this tiny little thing that's like steel wool. Just my fingers stank for ages. You scrub the shit out of it, and then you get like a stamp. After an hour, you get like a stamp-sized patch of glistening brass. That is the worst job ever. I could, if my parents, I'm going to call them after this.
You wouldn't be the man that you are today if it wasn't for all that brass polishing.
Look at that. Look at this gun. It's all due to brass polishing. So the point is, we had these sections of of my parents' gallery that were dedicated to different types of art. And the modern art section, although I enjoyed it, so many people walked in and just thought it was pretentious. Just immediately pretentious, you know. And I would look at like the section that was that sold really well, that was nature scenes, and I would think, God, I can't tell this piece of art from that other person. Two different people may have never ever met each other, but the fact that they're both doing the same subject matter and they're both kind of basic artists, you know, they're using the same strokes and everything, that you kind of look at it and you go, okay, maybe the color palette's a little different, but it's still a deer in a field.
Yeah,
you know?
I think the innovation for the point of innovation is also not very good either. You know, if we say that, yes, do something different, do something original, do something unique. If you stretch it out too far, then basically you get, you know, just or here's a game about a turd that's rolling down a hill and you got to touch the screen to make the turd jump, and it's like, you know, this is sort of, it's innovation just trying to be for innovation instead of. It's like, yes, we have something new, but look, you've never seen a game with a rolling turd in it before. Well, yes, that's right. This is really, you know, contributing to the art of game design as a whole, isn't it?
And there's people who think that Jackson Pollock is beautiful, and like Jackson Pollock would have said, I just threw paint at a screen, you know. So you can take your skills and you can take your art too far into the esoteric, and then you hurt things too. So there's this weird balance of being in the middle of not making it too crazy and artistic,
right,
and making it approachable. And then there's the point of not making it so simplistic that it doesn't offer anybody any kind of new experience. Yeah,
and I think the not only experience with game design helps with that, but also just general broad experience helps with that too. That, you know, if you're out to achieve something with your game other than, you know, something that is better than Call of Duty as a first-person shooter, for example, or, you know, something that brings something new and exciting and unique to bullet hell games or whatever. If that's your objective, then maybe you may find at the end that you come up with something that is a little bit too esoteric. Yes, it is very different, and I've never seen a bullet hell game like this before, but then, you know, as a game, does it really succeed? Is it fun?
Yeah. That's
anyway, let's get on to our topic for today. So
I just wanted to add one more thing before you move on.
Okay, you're not ranting.
As important as this topic is, I think it's to be unique and basically take everything we talked about if you're listening to the show and apply it. Oh my God, I'm not even watching the live room. I should watch the live room. See if anybody's in the chat. Nope, just you and me. We had somebody and he quit. So he must hate what we're talking about. But the point I'm trying to make is, even though we talked about art and we talked about game design, it still applies to audio, you know. Don't just do the typical. Try to do something that reaches beyond, and be prepared to iterate to come back to the typical. but the last thing I wanted to say is that as much as I'm a proponent of doing something completely new, I am guilty, and this is the dichotomy, I am guilty of not appreciating the new. For instance, I've played on my Ouya, a first-person shooter, that although was cool that it was developed by an indie studio, although it was cool that I could get in there and I could play against my friends and have some new experience, because of the graphics, I find myself not playing it. I wish there was a way that we could give that indie developers could produce graphics on the scale of Call of Duty and not have it cost them a lot in man hours or whatever or time. I wish there was a simpler way, because I'm drawn to games. Are you drawn to games because of their visuals? I really am drawn visually to a game before I'm drawn auditorily or design-wise to a game. I look at it and I go, that looks fun, and I want to play it. And so if the graphics are lacking from the first point, then I'm reluctant, to play the game just because of the graphics. So I'm as guilty of being a problem as I am a proponent of trying to do something new. Are you the same?
Yeah, I think I tend to, because at Winning Blimp our approach and our workflow is quite unusual, and I think because of that we tend to look for, or I tend to look for games that look like they've come through a similar kind of approach. So trying to find new games for me tends to be quite problematic. Yes, I do look at the screenshots and do watch the videos. I guess I tend to put more weight on the videos so I can actually see the game working, see somebody playing the game, and hopefully, if it's a decent YouTube reviewer, actually hear it instead of just listening to this ridiculous voiceover. I think I tend to try and be influenced by the big package, not just one aspect of it. But I see what you're saying, and I think it's getting easier and easier to get into game design, and Unity is doing a fantastic job at being a very, very low maintenance, sort of easy entry point into game development. It's a bit sort of like GarageBand for game design,
Oh, bad word.
Sorry. It's sort of.
I think even Unity would be mad at you for that comparison.
Well, no, I mean, okay, let's put it this way. It doesn't, functionality-wise, of course.
No, you made a great comparison. Don't listen to me.
Differently, but I mean, just sort of in terms of, look, you can use it for free. There's an asset store that you can get easy access to, a whole bunch of stuff that you can knock together your game design very, very quickly. Yeah. That was my point. Not that it's a drag and drop game development system like GarageBand is. But,
I was just being a pain in the ass.
Unity is doing a great job anyway at opening the door to game design and making it quite easy. And hope, maybe, who knows, in the future, with the development of the asset store and things like that, you may not have the most original looking game because, obviously, if everybody has access to the same assets.
Yeah.
As a sort of a budding game designer, then it's a fantastic place to start because you can get competitive, world-class graphics for your game idea right from the outset without actually having to know a graphic artist. But anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on. Good
so
point.
As the recently the official topic introducer of the Game Audio Hour, I'll
I love this job.
The topic for the rest of today's show is songwriting. Now, it would have been really nice to have our esteemed other panelists, Vince or Mike, here to contribute to this one because I was actually personally really looking forward to hearing their approach. But
songwriting
workflow. That's right. So this also sort of plays into the kinds of musicians that we are, what our bass instruments are, and the way that it's less about how to wrangle your DAW and more about the traditional process of putting together a song. But let me start by asking you, Mr.
Oh no, don't do that.
Kyle Guitar Rock God Johnson.
Where did this come from? Where did this happen? I don't understand this.
I mean, you have a guitar strap that is a seatbelt.
That's cool. You want to see it?
Yeah, let's have a look, everybody. I mean,
this is amazing.
So he's holding up a Les Paul, and he's got a.
Not just any Les Paul. This is a Les Paul Custom Double Cutaway Pro. This is
signed by Mr. Les Paul himself. Look at that.
No, he licked it for me, and then I told him to stop licking my stuff. Just unacceptable. And then he passed away. I don't think that's fair. It's not my fault.
What's that? Is that ebony, the fingerboard?
Oh, yeah. This is an ebony finger. Oh, I could talk about this guitar so long. This was basically Gibson's competition to Paul Reed Smith. And
I was going to say, it looks like a PRS, doesn't it?
Yeah, and not only did they take Paul Reed Smith and give him a good spanking, they
Right.
just made a guitar that is a classic all unto itself. It's a completely mahogany body and neck, ebony fingerboard, but I love that headstock. Look at that headstock.
It's pretty badass.
That is a beautiful headstock. It sounds so dumb, but guitars are pieces of art. The
Well,
wood.
they are, and it's not dumb. They are pieces of art.
Yeah, and this guy is just amazing. And what's really cool is this is the butterscotch one. They did a black and a blue, and this year, 1997, I think they only did 500 of each color. So they only did
Mm.
like 1,500 of these.
Is that
Somebody will
a
put.
is that a flame maple top?
It is a flame. It's a AAA matched, so you can see right
Oh,
across where they
amazing.
match each other. But anyway, so you wanted to talk about the guitar strap.
Well, just for a brief moment, actually, I wasn't thinking to
When I
derail the
grew up,
conversation. There you
when
go.
I when I grew up, we had cars that had giant like couches for seats, and if my mom turned the corner too quickly, I'd end up in the other part of the car. And this seatbelt strap that I saw someplace, it's literally the seatbelt material. Anybody who can see the video is seeing
Yeah,
the
won't it scratch your nice mahogany body though, all that metal
I,
there?
that's what's great about guitars is you beat the hell out of them. It's called character. I don't give a crap
Okay.
if this thing pops into the and causes a dent. But anyway, it comes off. It's literally a seatbelt buckle. You can hear it for those who aren't watching.
There's a good sound for a game project right there.
Yeah. Anyway, I
Anyway,
love
so
that strap.
back to the so we have Carl the Rock God turn it up to 11 Johnson here, and um, so yeah, what I was thinking to ask about is songwriting process. So
Thanks for
you
letting
have
me share that guitar. I love that guitar.
so just putting game audio aside for a moment, and if we're just talking about the process of writing a song,
Yeah.
whether it be, if you can talk in generic terms about whether it be some, epic piece of orchestral, frippery, or whether it be, sorry, no, don't start about Robert Fripp, or whether it be, on a piece of synth music or something more abstract, or what. What's your general process and workflow for putting together a song?
I love this subject, and I wish the other guys were here. I really want to hear their advice on it. But I'm actually kind of grateful it's just you and me so we can really dig in deeply because I love the stuff that you write, and I want to know what you do. I am fascinated by the difference between being a guitar player who writes stuff and a pianist who writes stuff.
Right.
I am a crap pianist, but I can get myself in trouble. I know enough to do some damage. What happens to me typically when I'm writing a piece is or listening to a piece, excuse me, is I can immediately tell if that guy's primary instrument is a guitar or a piano or some kind of like violin or something, or a bass guitar. Bassists actually write some of the best music I've ever heard. There's something in the mind of a bassist about maintaining that groove and maintaining that basic progression, excuse me, that it's like I'm always amazed about the composition of a bassist because when I listen to it, I have to back up to just to say that I'm more impressed with the simplicity of music. How many times do you listen to a song and go, "Oh my God, that's completely simple, but it sounds amazing"? And that really is the key, isn't it? That you would create something that sounds good and isn't difficult to create, And I was talking with some friends recently about my kind of overarching guitar journey, right?
Right.
And how it affected me musically. And it starts off as a very basic thing, but my mom was an enormous Pink Floyd fan, so I grew up with a lot of Pink Floyd. And so from a very early age, I was kind of into all this kind of weird sounds that would happen.
Right.
But I then traveled through this kind of Eagles kind of 70s, because, I was born in 1968, so I grew up in the 70s, and I grew up with the Eagles and America and stuff like that. And that happened at like the beginning of my guitar kind of training. Even though I started on violin first, then piano, guitar is really my instrument. The other
Right.
two I kind of just did because my parents told me I had to. But I went through this kind of simple phase, and then my brother's record collection I discovered, and I'm coming to your point, I discovered King Crimson, and I discovered Queen, and I discovered these more complicated kind of musical passages, and also my mom's love of Pink Floyd really started playing a role in my life. And I started going off on these weird tangents of very difficult music, and Yes became a very major band in my life. And then I kind of hit a wall, right? Because when you're writing music that's kind of complicated, you keep trying to write complicated music, right? And there's a limit to that muscle. Like, I can only lift 185 pounds. That's it. And even though I can lift 185 pounds and I go for 200, it's not like I can go for 300. That's all I can lift is 185 to 200 pounds. And eventually you go, okay, well, let me cut that back a little bit. Let me relax. Since I'm hitting a wall, let me learn from other forms of music. And that's when I started to realize that country existed. It's a bad word in some people's lexicon, or opera existed. But I started to really listen to, at that point, jazz was a huge thing for me. My grandmother was huge into it. And so when I went to college, I studied jazz. I wanted to study jazz performance because I'd gone through this rock and roll kind of weirdness and tried to get as avant-garde as possible. And then I just all of a sudden, something in me just said, you know, we really like Miles Davis, and we really like Billie Holiday, and we really like Gil Evans, and we really like, you know, some typical stuff that my grandmother was listening to. So in college, I started experimenting on that end, and it was interesting because I could take this really weird stuff I was trying to write and kind of put a form to it, a modal form to it, and start to figure out what to do on that side. But then I got done with college. I started dating a girl, and her dad was a professor at UCSB up here, Santa Barbara. And he said, have you ever heard of Neil Young? And I went, of course I've heard of Neil Young. Who hasn't heard of Neil Young? And he goes, let's play some Neil Young. And it was a nightmare for like his first 5 or 6 visits of just playing this boring 3-chord songs with him. And I kept trying to just go and do stuff. And he was like, no, slow down. Chill out. We're just playing Neil Young. And I'd start playing Neil Young. And then he's like, you ever heard of the Waterboys? And I was like, oh, no, I haven't. So then he plays me some Waterboys. And I'm like, oh, my God, this is a little more active. You know, that's kind of cool. And it's still Neil Young with like a good knees, you know, because Neil Young, you're not going to break a hip playing Neil Young. You know what I'm saying? But Neil Young with good knees is kind of like the Waterboys. And so I started loving the Waterboys. And when I got done with that lesson, he was a professor at UCSB, and I do consider it a lesson. I was like, holy cow, I've been trying way too hard to be too esoteric, too noodly, and there's something to just being simple. There's really something to just being simple. And that is really where my songwriting kind of took off. Not that I can take credit for any kind of good songwriting, because I think modesty is in short supply these days. But the truth is, it's very presumptuous to assume that you're writing good music. But I was happy with the music that I was writing when I accepted the simplicity of good music. And I had to go through this whole journey to get there, of experimenting with different styles. I quickly learned that as much as I respect country guitarists, I will never be a country guitarist, because there's a dexterity to that I just don't have. And I've played and been around many guitarists in my life, and I find that when the ones that haven't learned that lesson, they'll say they've learned that lesson, but egotistically they have not learned that lesson. They still want to play as fast as possible, squeeze in as many notes as possible, and they want to impress people that are listening to them. I find those people to be making a major mistake. They really need to accept that being blazingly fast, being a Steve Vai, Joe Satriani kind of player, is not good for you. You actually have to have some emotion to your music, and to have emotion, you have to give people time to feel it. It's not about playing slow. It's about giving time to people to experience what it is that you're trying to say musically. And when you zoom through these passages, you're not doing that. You're just showing your technique. And so as I dropped technique, 2 things happened. I became very aware that I was losing my edge, that I wasn't as fast-fingered as the next guy, and I had to learn, egotistically, I had to let it go and just say it's okay. And here's the irony of my whole story, is when it came back to me learning to relax with my ability to not want to play super fast, to just want to feel the notes, 80 beats per minute became my best friend. When that happened, it really did. My wife laughs at me. She says, "You can't write anything outside of 80 beats per minute." I'm like, "I can do 160." I'm glad you got that. But when I finally was able to accept who I'd become as a musician through this whole journey, it came back to Pink Floyd, and it came back to David Gilmour, and I would listen to these fantastic musical passages, not his solos, just things that he would add, and I go, "Man, that guy is slow. He is not in any hurry to get things done." So then I had this whole appreciation for Neil Young, and I had this whole appreciation for music that was not about being fast and being complicated, but about being about having some emotional content, no matter what that beats per minute was. And I'm sorry to go off on that diatribe. I just wanted to kind of relate to you what it was, a conversation that I had just had with a friend about the same thing. And he had the exact same musical journey. He had gone on these crazy tangents of music and come back to where the heart of the music existed, and it was within these simple chord structures that portrayed a lot of emotion. How about you?
Is he a guitarist?
No, he's a pianist, actually.
Okay. See, this is really interesting because I think there's a lot to reflect on in your non-diatribe just there, but
very similar to a diatribe, non-diatribe, because I said it was a non-diatribe diatribe.
That's right. Firstly, I think as a bass player, automatically your approach. So I started like you. I started on violin, and then I went to harp. No, I started on viola da gamba. No. I started on harpsichord. Then I went to viola da gamba, which, for those who don't know, is like a baroque cello, basically, except it's a 6-string fretted instrument with gut strings, anyway. Then from there I went to violin, then French horn, and then bass guitar, and sort of left, just been playing bass guitar for the last 20 plus years. But I think that when you're in a band, when you're on bass, okay, so to begin with, I love jazz bass, so of course, give me your Jaco Pastorius or your Marcus Miller or your, Victor Wooten or whoever, and I'm happy. However, when it comes down to it, you are basically in control of this huge 15-inch cone that's sort of flapping around in the wind as you're playing. So if you launch into this massive flurry of notes all over the place, yeah, of course you can do that, and it sounds really good in some contexts, but in general, it's not really practical. And so you come to a point when you're playing bass where it becomes more than the notes that you're playing, and more about the other things that you can do as a bass player, which is influence the harmony and create counterpoint with melodies, and also, of course, have a rhythmic influence. Those 3 things are, as a bass player, they become far much more satisfying, like locking in with the drummer, listening to what the guitarist and the keyboardists are doing, and doing something else, and sort of playing off what they're doing with a new, different kind of melody, and basically sort of providing this bedrock to the sound. That, as a bass player, becomes far much more satisfying much sooner than, say, it would for a guitar player who's gone that journey. Suddenly they actually, from a technique point of view, they're actually now able to do all these huge, fast, licks all over the fingerboard. Technique, they've finally caught up with that. Eventually they'll come around, as you did, they'll come around and they'll realize that, wow, rhythm guitar is kind of interesting. And then from there they'll realize, wow, actually not standing up the front of the band with one leg up on the fold, on the fold back, doing this is actually you can do that, and it's a bit of fun for a few gigs, but after a while you realize that it's much more interesting just being the guy at the back, just holding it down. Oh, yeah. And I guess, as bass players, just because of the physical nature of the instrument and the sound that it produces, you reach that point of finding that very satisfying much, much sooner than, say, like a keyboardist or somebody with some capacity for solo performance. And so, for me, it's been really interesting because I guess I reached that point very, very quickly. And the kind of music that I started on was there's only 2 kinds of music that influenced everything that I do. Number 1 is demo scene music, and number 2 is ABBA.
Oh, that's awesome. That's fantastic.
And when you think about it, both of those are highly technique-centric. Demo scene music, I think we mentioned before, and I'm not going to launch off into Game Audio Hour Tracker Special number 73. But
help yourself.
Demo scene music, of course, you see the demo, you're listening to the music, then you'll get access to the module, the mod file as they were called, for the demo music. And then you're actually watching the music scrolling away in front of your face, and you can see all the notes there, and you can see the little neat tricks and things they're doing to overcome the 4 channels that the Amiga had. It's all there, so very much the technique is on show, and it's for everybody to see as well as listen to. And so very quickly it becomes more about the cool things that people are doing with 4 channels instead of, my God, listen to how this music emotionally affects me. So it's a very sort of technique-centric, in the day, that is. I mean, of course, sonically they were limited too, so there's only a certain range of emotions that you can give somebody with just 4 channels of 8-bit sound. Of course, fans of the retro game consoles and their music will argue with me there, but the point is that the focus is less, for the demo scene guys anyway, the focus is less about the emotional achievement and more about just getting around the technical limitations. So ABBA as well. ABBA is, at least in my opinion, some of the, next to Uptown Girl by Billy Joel, probably some of the finest pop music ever written. It's so complicated. It is so complicated. It's not simple stuff. It's not just 3 or 4 chords. It's extremely intricate. And I think I remember an interview with Benny and Björn saying that their approach to it was that basically if somebody's going to spend this much money on a record of theirs, they want to provide as much value as possible.
Absolutely.
So that means that if you've got this empty passage of sort of a lull in the pace of the music, they just want to fill it up with extra little melodies and extra harmonies and extra sort of instrumentation, extra texture, just to give this huge sense of value in the song that you've just bought. Yeah. And when you listen to one of their tracks, there is never ever a moment when there's sort of downtime from a musical or harmonic point of view. It's just constant, full-on, additional counterpoint melodies, back melodies, interesting harmonies, these great background vocals, guitar solo, great drum things, and the bassist from ABBA is one of my favorite bassists of all time. He's brilliant at just adding these little bits to fill up the spaces. So I came from a background basically of all technique. So when it came my turn to sort of sit down, like 20 years ago, to try and start writing music, I thought, well, it has to be about technique. It's all about technique. It's all about showing your chops in a way, like your harmonic chops, or that's
a
for
very
me.
young attitude, isn't it, to do that?
It's what?
It's a very young attitude to do that.
Yeah, I think it's like the guitarist thing as well. When you become physically able to play all of these incredible fast licks, just like your idols, the guys with their leg up on the foldback, impressing the chicks with their incredible guitar playing.
And their sock. And the sock.
The sock?
Never mind. It's a bad joke.
Okay. When you get to that point and you're actually able to do that, then it's a whole lot of fun doing that for a little while.
A week and a half.
Yeah, and I think it's been really interesting now. The appreciation that I have for ABBA music hasn't actually changed. It's like I don't listen to it now and think, my God, listen to that simplicity. Or
another thing, if I can interject just really quickly, with game audio, we aren't given the time to develop a song of the complicated kind of magnitude that ABBA would create stuff. I wish we were. I wish that we could say, I want to create some epic kind of piece of music, and they go, okay, we've got 9 months until this game comes out. Start now.
Right.
Because even 9 months, that's one song in the lexicon of an ABBA, in the time of an ABBA song. Sorry, I said lexicon incorrectly. But geez, man, I wish we had that kind of time, because I appreciate that music. I love that music, and I don't for one think that ABBA was overly complicated. That's just good writing. It's simple in its abstractions. If you pull this line away from that line, those are two simple things, but when you put them together, they get a little bit they become counterpoints, and they make it seem like it's complicated when it really isn't.
Yeah, I agree. The one thing with game audio is it was really fun. I'm not trying to pander the wares of my company here, but with our second game, with Winning Blimp, with Mosaic, it
Yeah.
was really fun that we just thought, how should we implement this music? So we wrote the music to the game first. How should we implement it? Now let's just have just this music that plays through the whole thing. It's one track of music. It's 10
Awesome.
minutes long, and it was very satisfying. You didn't. It's no like loops and layers and anything like that. It's just one piece of music that goes for 10 minutes, and because you play the game for 10 minutes, you always hear you'll arrive at the same kind of point in the game through one playthrough, at the same point of the song every time that you play. So it was a nice chance to just sort of stretch a piece of music out and take it from one place to another place, like you would do when you're actually playing the game itself. So it is a shame that there aren't more usage cases for that approach, where basically, yeah, it's not so much. It is, I guess, reactive to what the player is doing. However, it's reactive in a musical way and not in a technical way. And by that I mean it's not so much a case of you just wander into a certain area of the game and then all of a sudden you've got this track, this layer coming in, or the boss battle begins and all of a sudden this fades in. Not responsive in that sense, but I mean reactive in that sense. But I mean reactive in the sense that if there was a pacing to the game, that the first few minutes of the game will be like this, the middle section of the game will be like this, and the final few minutes of this playthrough will be like this, then being able to actually make a piece of music that just arches between those three sections as one piece of music. There's a very lo-fi, technically uncomplicated way to make reactive music, but I think that it'd be nice to have more of that. I think we're pushing into very interesting new territory with having music that reacts to what the player is doing, of course, and that's fantastic. And that should be the main thing of what we're doing. However, it's really nice as well to have the opportunity to just write pieces of music that fit, for example, a 4-minute flow,
Yeah.
and you just have the music just flow with the game, and it's just one piece of music that does that. Anyway, coming back to songwriting.
Yeah, per level. Do you do that per level?
In
On a bigger game, would you do the same thing per level, a different song per level?
Yes, I think I'd like to. I mean,
Yeah.
just a lot of the classic games that we play, they have like this is the level 1 music, and this is the level 2 music, and the level 3 music, and because like I can think of a classic example on the Amiga was Turrican 2 with the soundtrack by Chris Hulsbeck. That had sort of graphically it was quite distinct between the different levels of the game, and so just this one looping 3 or 4 minute soundtrack as you play through each world, each sort of level of the game, really sort of gave a strong sort of signature to the aesthetic quality of each level through the game. So there was nothing reactive about that. It was just a simple implementation, but it sort of seems to me that it gives it really makes use of the music fully, that this is one music track for this world, and it's going to be the same time every time you play it, but that's what you want, that's what you expect after a while. So anyway, coming back to songwriting.
Oh, go ahead. I have a question for you real quickly.
Okay, you go ahead.
But only if I'm not interrupting your flow, because I don't want you to lose your thought.
That's all right. I don't lose thoughts. I don't have many to begin with, so there's only one or two. Go ahead.
Do you use any techniques, specific techniques, when you're writing something to kind of get past that hump? Like one thing I learned in college, and it's so simple, but I use it all the time, is that if your rhythm is in like 4/4, let's use 4/4 example, when you're going to transition into something, chromatically, walk half steps 4 times backwards. So if I'm in C, I would walk backwards 4 half steps, which would be, I'm terrible at this, B, A sharp, A, G sharp, right?
Right.
And then your change is in G sharp.
Okay, I'll have to try that.
I do it all the time. Every time you listen to most times when you listen to something from me, if there's like a middle 8 or something and I'm doing something different, it's going to be, depending upon the beat. If it's in 3/4, I only move back 3 steps. If it's in 4/4 steps. If it's in 6/8, I move back 6 steps. But you move backwards. The number of steps that is the upper denominator. Is that what is the anyways, you move back. I'm terrible at terminology. So you move back those steps, and then you do your change in that key for the part, and it creates. Sometimes it doesn't work. Let's be honest. But and if it doesn't work, if it sounds terrible, I'll move to where I need to be to make it sound like it matches. But most time it works pretty well. Do you have any kind of tricks like that you use?
Yeah, I do have one. It's very simple. Being that I'm a bassist and I don't play piano very well, the process of songwriting for me is more about playing the tracker interface. So I'm actually writing a lot of the music on the QWERTY keyboard, just same way as you've been doing for like 20 years since back in the Amiga days. So for me, the easiest trick when I get into a rut is to just leave the computer, go to the bass, and just try and play it on the bass. Whatever I'm doing, if it's the chord part I'm stuck with, play that. If it's the drums I'm stuck with, play that on the bass. Or if it's the melody, just play that on the bass. So I think if you don't write with your main instrument in your hand the whole time, then giving yourself the opportunity to just stand up, remove yourself from the digital side of it, and just play it on your main instrument, regardless of what part it is. If you're a pianist and you want to play the drums, then just think about playing the piano with the approach of a drummer. Mm-hmm. Same with playing the bass as well. That tends to help me a lot.
You can't tell on your keyboard where the fifth is. You can look and you can go, I'm going to move to the fifth from the root, mm-hmm. And through your brain, through theory, you know what the fifth is, and you start doing something. But that's completely different if you were to jump on the bass and move up to the fifth, because it kind of, as a guitar player, it opens up a whole new world of possibilities for me when I see it on the neck of a guitar rather than when I see it in a MIDI piano roll.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I do kind of wish there was I've never ever looked into sort of like MIDI, like bass MIDI interfaces or anything. It'd be nice to have some easy way to actually, I'm sure the technology is out there and I'm sure it's fantastic, but I think that the process of just removing yourself. I used to have I got a 5-string bass once with I took the low B off the bottom and redid the nut so that it was EADGC. So it's like a 6-string without the low B.
Yeah.
Because the low B is stupid. It's just like this big floppy kind of warbly thing at the bottom that doesn't do much.
We need to put that like a poster on the wall the next like orchestral session. Low B is stupid.
The low B is
stupid. Alex May.
That's right. Yeah, but actually
get up and walk out.
That was kind of useful because with an extra high C, you can play more of the sort of like for example, the piano parts. You can imitate them more easily at the top of the bass. So anything that you can do to make your main instrument more useful as a tool to sort of get around creative blocks, I think that would be my advice. Like as you say as well, not that I'm the world's greatest songwriter, but that's what I tend to do. It tends to work for me.
I thought you were on the show because you are the world's greatest songwriter.
Oh, you must be right. Yeah, I forgot. I forget these things. No, that's ridiculous. The other thing I would just add in the remaining 2 minutes, or the remaining 1 minute, is
keep going.
Is for synth guys and girls who are into music, making music with synthesizers, whether they be hardware or software. Trying your best to separate, to a certain degree, separate the sound design process from the music process.
Mm-hmm.
To a certain degree. Like I tend to find that you can't completely divorce the two. What I mean by separate is you start by creating the sounds that you think you'll need for your song, and then you start writing the song, instead of trying to create and tweak the sounds as you're writing the song. You tend to find that you're playing a bass, you've got a bass line in there, and you think, oh, it's not really sounding very good. So the first thing you may do is go and try and tweak the sound, when actually it may not be the sound that's the problem. It may just be the notes that are the problem.
I just did that this past week. I just had that same experience.
Often it does help to have the options. Maybe it might be that the sound is just not quite lending itself to this. If you like the melody of the bass.
It was a note. I totally was choosing the wrong note, and it just wasn't matching. Although it was in the scale, it just wasn't matching.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think it's effective. Sometimes I think it does help to sort of change the sound a bit and see how it plays off with the notes and see if the notes sound better or different because of a different sound. But if you get too fixed into sound design while you're in the middle of the composition process, it's sort of like a form of procrastination in a way that you're not really dealing with the key problem, which is that the notes aren't really good enough. So that's one thing that I often catch myself doing. That's one weakness that I have is I often catch myself fiddling with a synth instead of thinking about how I can use the sound that I have in a musical way that suits the sound, as opposed to always thinking that I can change it if it's not fitting.
That's a good point. Do you ever, also, would you recommend, and I know we said it in the past, so I'm really kind of throwing a softball here, but simplifying your situation musically, I think, is always better. It's stronger for your writing. I'll sit oftentimes, we have a grand piano out in the live room, and I'll just sit there and try to figure out stuff. And I enjoy that because I grab a pencil, a piece of paper, and I sit at that grand piano. I don't have my guitar and all my pedals and all this software, and that's it. That's all I got. And it really forces me to focus on what the melody is, what the harmonies are, what the progression is, what the arrangement's going to be, what the meter's going to be. I mean, it really forces me to focus. And yet, if I grab a guitar and try to do the same thing like an acoustic guitar with no pedals plugged in, this is where I was going at the beginning of the show, is I write like a guitarist. And if I sit at a piano, I write like, frankly, a guitarist sitting at a piano. But I definitely like pianists' ability to write more than I like a guitarist's ability to write. And I wonder if the instrument is locking us into a type of writing style. Like,
have we done that topic yet? Because that's been a topic that I've been really looking forward to doing on this show, especially with Mike and Vince.
We can do it now. We've only got 2 minutes minus to do it.
Because I think that would be.
We need to do it.
That'd be an interesting topic. I think I think maybe we sort of touched on it a little bit. We've never actually dedicated a whole show to it because we've never had Mike and Vince here at the same time because they're actually the same person.
Yeah, it's Janet and Michael Jackson. I definitely find it harder to write orchestral stuff on a guitar, and I've done all kinds of crazy stuff. Like I've got over here my Yamaha G50 and a MIDI pickup on my guitar so that I can like plug in a violin sound, or I can actually assign MIDI channels to each string on the guitar so that when I'm playing a chord it can sound like a violin, a cello, a viola, all this stuff playing in unison, this chord structure. And when I get done, I go, hey, that sounds like a guitar part. Sounds like a guitarist is conducting an orchestra, and I just can't get away from that. I wish I would have never quit the piano lessons at 8 years old. I went back and took them later as an adult for a couple of years, and that really helped. But piano is just such an important instrument to learn, and to learn how to write big pieces. Like I could go on for hours about how pianists seem to have an easier entryway into writing orchestral music than certainly guitar does. Would you agree? And definitely we need to talk about that on a future show.
Yeah, I think I would agree. Although bassists automatically think rhythm and melody mixed together, and I guess from as an extension of melody, also harmony as well. So I guess the stunted people are guitarists only, Kyle. I guess you guys are the only handicapped ones out there as far as writing music. And
this goes along with what I'm saying, and I don't mind going over because we've got nobody in the chat room, so we don't have a time constraint. Absolutely, guitar is locking me into guitar writing, and I wonder if other instruments do that. Like if a violinist only can write stuff that like a violinist would hear.
Probably not. I mean, guitar is such a good instrument. It's such a fantastic instrument because you have all of those aspects available to you. You have rhythm, you have harmony, and you have melody, all available to you in the one instrument. However, you can achieve all three of those things very effectively with the one instrument. However, it is an instrument that has 6 strings, and it does in the end, the tuning of the strings and the fact that you're operating them with 4 or 5 fingers. In the end, it does come back to it being organized like a guitar musically. Whether you're doing rhythm or harmony or melody, it's just I think the guitar's versatileness in that sense kind of comes back and bites it in the bum, I guess, because it limits you in the way that all of those 3 things that you can achieve are still physically on this instrument with 6 strings and 4 or 5 fingers.
Yeah.
So
It's very aggravating because it's easier for me to write, but every time I write, I think it's Gerard Marino who said that he has a love for kind of 80s rock and stuff like that, and he incorporates that love of that music into his orchestral compositions. Um,
isn't he a
but
guitarist?
no, no, he's a pianist, but he has
Oh,
learned to
okay.
play guitar, and you can kind of hear it in his compositions. You can hear that rock and roll sensibility, that kind of 80s
Mm.
rock. I'm going to say glam rock, but he might get mad at me. I'm going to get a phone call in 10 minutes. Let me turn off my phone. But he makes a lot of sense by saying, do what it is that you love and incorporate that into your songwriting. But the things that
Mm.
I love have no business being in any kind of orchestral thing. Like I love Soundscapes by Robert Fripp. Nah, that's just pads on a synthesizer. That's not really an orchestra. You don't want to go to an orchestra and hear them pulling an E chord for the next half hour and doing little, weird stuff on it. So it's funny because we really should do this on another show where we talk about where your influences came from, what's your primary instrument, and how does that affect you as a songwriter? Because um, I really am reaching outside of my comfort zone every time I write for games. I have to like almost take on the persona of somebody not who is not me to try to write stuff for a game because everything that I like musically doesn't really fit into the game,
Mm.
the idea of what game audio is. It does fit into like I'll grab my guitar and a bunch of pedals and 4 amps and I'll go to a coffee house and I'll do soundscapes for a couple of hours and I love that.
Mm.
But nobody wants that in their game soundtrack. So I really have to become somebody completely non-Kyle Johnson to go write for a game, and I think that's very fascinating. And I think it starts from the fact that I'm a guitar player, whereas if I were a pianist, I would be privy to some writing sensibility that isn't that's almost alien to me, really.
Well, I think on that fine note, we should
Oh my God.
make a point to get some keyboardists on the show, and let's talk about that next time.
That would be awesome because I would learn a lot from that show. That would be fantastic.
Well, this has been fun.
Yeah, I love it when we have shows like this because it's just you and me hanging out and talking about stuff. What's funny is I wish the people who are watching the show could be with us the half hour before the show when you and I are just talking this crap beforehand. But anyway, thanks, buddy. And next week, we're trying to shoot for a special show. I hope it comes together. And please like us on Facebook and subscribe to us on Twitter. I think I did those backwards. No, it's like us on Twitter. What do you do on Twitter?
You twat.
You twat? Please twat us on Twitter. And oh, wait a minute. I almost said something very bad about Facebook using the first 3 letters of Facebook. That was not going to come out very well. Please Facebook us on Facebook. Please like us on Facebook. Please follow us on Twitter. Game Audio Hour on both of those accounts. And also, thanks,
Subscribe on
Alex.
YouTube as well, don't forget.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Subscribe on YouTube. Let me explain the YouTube thing. So we've got all of our episodes prepped for YouTube. Or, sorry, Apple. I want to explain the Apple thing. We have got all of our episodes prepped for Apple. And we've pushed a number of those episodes to Apple. But something is happening that our Apple is not happening. So if somebody at Apple wants to call me and let me know what's going on, I'd appreciate it. But I'm literally getting emails of people saying, "Where's your stuff on Apple?" And I so apologize for that because we're trying to figure out what the problem is. I don't know what's going on, but we have a friend helping us with it. Anyway, we are actively trying to fix that problem and get all our episodes. On Apple right now, we're only up to episode 14. Can you imagine how many episodes? Next week's going to be our 40th episode. We're 12
Amazing.
episodes away from a year. So we have a lot of episodes to explode onto iTunes as soon as we figure out what's going on with Apple. And also, I heard back today that there's some sort of lag situation happening with our Apple episodes. We have to figure that out too. Anyway, I wanted you to know, the people listening and watching, that we are actively working on that. We'll figure it out. I don't know. It's probably a problem on our end because there's thousands of people that push their podcast to Apple without any problem. So we're doing something wrong. Could be our editing software. We don't know what it is, but we're going to figure it out. We're going to keep pushing to have that done. Please like us on Facebook. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, and please follow us on Twitter. And I'll see you next week, Alice.
Bye.
Bye.